to the Ghost of Harrenhal. My name's Simon.
And I'm Mackelly.
Thank you for joining us for episode 118 of our chapter-by-chapter book review of A Song of Ice and Fire by George Martin. Today we'll be discussing chapter 44 of A Clash of Kings. That's Tyrion 10.
And the plan, as always, is to chat about the chapter, try not to spoil any future plot points for you, and hopefully provide you some entertainment along the way.
We'll summarise what happened, discuss our thoughts on it, provide some useful background, compare it to the television show, indulge in a little pedantry, and cover some reader mail. Be sure to check out the show notes. They'll help you if you're not reading along. They'll help you if you are reading along, but they'll help you even more if you're not reading along. How are you, sir?
I'm doing okay. You know, I think I've decided that I should probably call you Simon Silvertongue for this whole episode.
Yes, that's funny, actually. I keep blanking on his name, that character. It's weird. But simultaneously, I've been off on the Discord server, sort of chitty-chatty with everyone.
I think that should be your new Discord server handle, is name? Simon Silvertongue.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Of course, a whole bunch of inappropriate jokes could be made about that name. But
well played.
As we keep this PG-13, I won't bring any of them up.
Yes, I have no recollection of him as a character, so I don't know if he's going to stick around or not, because he's in this chapter, but I can't tell. His fate is very much in the balance at the end of this chapter, so he could be very short-lived, or actually could stick around, because basically his fate either goes to an immediate end, or to actually he'll be in quite a few chapters, because he's going to be kept around.
Right. I do remember how it goes, but I will not tell you unless you want me to.
No, I don't want. Okay. I love the mystery.
Right.
It's weird for us to spoil our own show before we start.
It's one way to open. We've done 117 of these. We got to mix it up.
Now, not to ruin it for you, but we're going to be talking about Tyrion 10. And this is what happens.
Do you know, so I just dropped Molly off at swim practice. That's why we're starting a little late here tonight. And, you know, I was flipping through the radio stations, and I heard Christmas music. And we are only a week into November, and already Christmas music on the radio. And you know me, I go all out for such things, but not on November 8th. Even for me, that's too early.
You see, the weird thing is, This is an interesting American rest of the world difference, because obviously the corporations of this world would like to extend the Christmas period because there's money to be made, right?
Right. Yes.
So of course. Some of it is that. Some of it is like, oh, we'd like to get the Christmas music going a little bit early, kind of thing, you know. And then some people are lunatics and they want Christmas music, you know, for 4 months of the year, you know.
Right.
But in the United States, you have a very significant holiday a month out from Christmas,
right?
Which the rest of the world does not have. So you actually have like a dividing line.
The holiday season,
right? The rest of the world has nothing to stop Christmas from spreading into September. You know,
because it is Christmas joy for all to hear, like Elf.
Right? Yeah. In America, it is strange to hear Christmas music before Thanksgiving because you've got Thanksgiving. But in the rest of the world, I mean, like, you know, late September, especially in England. Especially in Northern Europe, where, like, you know, the nights are getting colder and darker by that point.
Sure.
You know? It actually feels kind of Christmassy, you know.
They're already rocking God Rest You Merry Gentlemen in mid-October.
You know what I discovered today, Mackelly? I discovered we had a new listener join the Discord server from Australia. Right. And she was saying she's just binge listened to the whole thing. She's up to date now. But she was saying that we don't drop in Australia till Tuesday.
Oh, I saw that. Oh, that's
I don't know how you get through Monday, really.
I know. Like, we're supposed to be what gets you through Monday.
Right. Yeah. We might have to, I don't know, do something for the Australians, you know, sort of like an uncut version with our stuttering and
oh man. With how late I get started editing, it would be quite uncut. I think yesterday, because we're recording on a Monday, I think yesterday I finished editing at about 8 p.m. So I gave myself about a 3-hour window there. 4 hour, I guess. Yeah.
About an hour before you started that, you emailed me to say, you know what, those show notes look an awful lot like the last show notes. I was like, yeah, that's because they're just a copy.
I've learned to check that because you write in there the correct episode title, but then if you look down, the info is not. So
I'm aware of what has happened when that happens. So what have I got for you? I feel like I've got something for you.
I'm sure you do. You lead such an interesting and varied life.
I really don't. Oh, update on my tennis. My tennis is getting very excited. You know, remember my tennis? We play 101 matches,
right?
And we played so the first of 51 wins that mega match. The current score in our second mega match is 41-40.
Wow, you're coming down to it too.
It is. I won the first one 51-40, 51-42. So I really need to put the hammer down if I'm going to match that this time.
Are you currently the 41 or the 40?
Would I be telling you this if I was losing, Mackelly?
Solid point. Yeah, I should have even needed to ask that.
All right, let us get down to business. How did we leave Tyrion Lannister? Last time we saw Tyrion, it wasn't very long ago, was it? It was like 3 chapters ago.
Yeah, we're on Tyrion 10 in chapter 44. So
yeah, he's a big part of this book.
Yeah.
Last time we saw him, he was saying adieu to his niece Myrcella as she sailed away to her new life in Dawn via everywhere in the whole world. He was part of the royal party that was then attacked in the streets by hungry citizens. He learned from head of the Gold Cloaks, Jacelyn Bywater, that the people blame Tyrion for their woes. And with Varys and Bronn, he came dangerously close to discussing regicide. Mackelly, why don't we give him the summary of this one?
Okay. I'm going to get my editing work in here because I've only read the summary once this morning. We put this particular show together in a day?
This is a new record. We turned this one around. Because it only occurred to me, probably 6 hours after we recorded the last one, that we really had to record this one today, 24 hours later. So we had to both, feverishly read the chapter and then get all this stuff together. So if it sounds a little unpolished and perhaps shorter, that's because... or longer, actually. I mean, that's one of the things, especially with you. You definitely start with a long and we sort of trim it down.
Yes, I do. I'll fill the notes out pretty thoroughly. But we have the gift of gab. I'm sure we'll make a fairly decent dent into this.
Do I look worried?
You do not. No one else can see him but me, but he does not look worried. Anyway, here comes the summary. Lancel informs Tyrion that Cersei wants to get Tommen out of King's Landing. The plan is to disguise the prince as the son of a hedge knight and have him squire at Rosby with Lord Giles Rosby. It's close to King's Landing, just to the northeast in the Crown Lands. Tyrion doesn't want to derail this plan. He actually agrees with it. But he wants Tommen under the care of men loyal to him, not the Queen.
He sends Bronn with a written message to Sir Jacelyn Bywater of the Gold Cloaks. The written message instructs him to go down the Rose Road. However, Bronn is to give Bywater the real message, which is to ignore the letter and to instead intercept Tommen's party and continue on to Rosby. No killing in front of Tommen, no harm to befall Lord Giles. And when he gets there, Bywater should replace the garrison with his own men, but otherwise stick to the plan. For this, Bywater will receive a lordship.
Meanwhile, Tyrion heads to Shae, riskily skipping the ruse of Shatia's brothel. The citywide curfew making him feel like he couldn't be followed without his knowledge. Tyrion is annoyed by the presence of a singer when he gets there, particularly when the singer recognizes him. Word cannot get out of his relationship with Shae, but Shae doesn't want the singer harmed. Tyrion agrees that the singer can stay on in her household.
That's Simon Silvertongue.
Uh-huh.
But you see how his life hangs in the balance right now.
Yes.
I mean, he might become a regular in the book. He might be for the chop. Tyrion dismisses the singer, but is then disturbed so that he can have alone time with Shae.
Right.
But it then is disturbed again, this time by Varys in disguise. Shae sees straight through the disguise. In her profession, it pays to see the man under the clothes. Wait, that came out wrong. you know what I mean.
It does literally pay to see the man.
Varys' news is that Sir Courtney Penrose has killed himself. jumped from the walls of Storm's End. The castle has fallen, and Stannis may well soon be headed to King's Landing. Tyrion is furious.
Tyrion intends to cut short his visit. He sends Varys to the stables while he and Shae say their goodbyes. She wants to become his legit woman, but he was expressly forbidden from bringing her to King's Landing, so he cannot. She is in real danger, so Tyrion wants her to come into the Red Keep as a kitchen scallion. She is...
that word is scullion.
Scullion.
The word
yes.
you've got there is a green onion.
Yes,
She just stands in the pantry pretending to be a leek. Make your hair tufty and wear your green dress.
I was writing quickly. I did say scallion too. But he was expressly forbidden from bringing her to King's Landing, so he cannot. She is in real danger, so Tyrion wants her to come into the Red Keep as a kitchen scullion. She is not happy. They argue. She asks if he's afraid of being spanked by his father. He slaps her. She is cold from then on. The story of his marriage to Tysha comes spilling out of his mouth, but it doesn't change her mood. Eventually, she submits to his will.
He leaves and heads back with Varys. Varys agrees to help bring Shae to the castle, but offers a better route. Lady Tanda's maidservant is stealing from her, and Varys could have her removed any time and replaced with Shae. Mm-hmm. The job would be easy. Lawless never goes out of her apartment since the rape, and furthermore, Varys knows of secret passages that Shae could use to enter the Tower of the Hand unseen. Tyrion is agog that such passages exist.
Varys and Tyrion discuss Penrose's death. The details point to something very strange, but Tyrion is a skeptic. Varys confesses the story of how he became a eunuch. A sorcerer of some sort cut him and burned his genitalia on a fire. At that point, he heard a voice in the flames, and no amount of fear or agony, nor the passage of time, have ever shaken Varys' belief that it was real magic, try as he might. But his belief in magic is not acceptance. He despises it, and if he were to believe that Stannis was dabbling in it, he'd kill him.
Tyrion is horrified and expresses pity for Varys, but he's still dubious about Sir Courtenay's demise. An assassin might have achieved the same ends without magic. But Varys throws in the confusing and uncertain accounts of Renly's death as further evidence that Stannis, or someone close to Stannis, is dabbling in the dark arts. Tyrion's more concerned with the news that Stannis is coming, while Tywin is still bogged down with Robb Stark, and no other help appears imminent. The inhabitants of King's Landing, who by and large despise Tyrion, have no one else to turn to.
Okay.
So, I actually do think perhaps it's time for some outtakes, because I really enjoyed that one.
Yes, there was quite a few.
If it hits the cutting room floor, let me tell you, Mackelly called Shae a scallion.
Maybe I'll leave that in there just because it was so funny.
So, after the fireworks of the last Tyrion chapter, which was really, I mean, if you remember that one, that was the Myrcella one, and then the ride through King's Landing, and the
rioting,
death and mayhem. Yeah. This one's relatively lackluster, I think.
It is.
But interestingly, it starts with the same theme. Basically, Cersei's children being sort of absconded out of King's Landing to keep them safe. Right. Last time it was Myrcella actually heading out, and this time it's a plan to get Tommen out.
Right, yeah. And Tyrion asks Lancel, who's the one that's giving him this information, is it the mob she fears or me? And Lancel says, well, both. They're referring to Tyrion's deal with the Martells for the betrothal of Myrcella, and so she must be fearing that Tyrion might pull the same deal with not to betroth Tommen to Trystane Martell, but a similar deal with
really, you can only do that once, I think.
Right, yeah, with Prince Tommen, and you would think, I mean, he might fetch an even better deal because he's currently the heir to the Iron Throne.
True enough.
If he could make a match that would work for an alliance, he very well just might go and do that.
But of course, she's actually doing the same thing. I mean, she's sending her child away. I mean, that's what she was afraid Tyrion might do, and she's doing it herself. She is sending him to Rosby, which is about as close to King's Landing as you possibly can send someone
Yes.
without still being in King's Landing.
She's basically
unless
just
he wants
sending
to
him out the
squire
gate.
in Flea Bottom. So Lancel's doing what he's been asked to do. He's providing useful intel. For this, he's getting kind of demanding because he realizes that he's actually being useful to Tyrion. So he wants command in the forthcoming battle with Stannis, one of the flanks. But I mean, just Lancel, you're a dingbat. I mean, like, it's the last thing you should be asking for. This battle is not going to go your way. I mean, or it might, but it's going to be a lot of death involved, I feel.
Yes, I agree. I'm wondering if he will be wielding his dreaded wineskin on the battlefield.
See,
Here, have a sip.
Not going to work on Stannis.
No, it's not.
It worked on Robert, but not Stannis.
Yeah. One brother, not the other. Yeah, I'm thinking that wineskin might be about as lethal as Lightbringer. So, he might go out there with it and squirt people in the eye, blind them.
The two of them together, the wineskin and Lightbringer, could be really dangerous. So Tommen being hidden as a squire with his hair darkened. Like I said, Rosby's very close. I don't think it's a good enough ruse, because if Stannis storms King's Landing and takes it, okay,
right, yeah,
he beheads Joffrey, and then he's like, "Where's Tommen?" And so you'd spread out from King's Landing looking for Tommen, right? The first place you'd come to is Rosby.
Yes. And
then I sort of imagine who's this kid? Oh, well, he arrived a few weeks ago with that Kingsguard fella and 50 gold cloaks. I hear he's the son of a hedge knight, The gig is up for Tommen there and then, I feel.
Yeah. Yep. Just might be. That just might be enough clues to put together.
Right.
But what they'll
he has
do...
got dark hair. Wait a minute. That rubs off.
What they'll do is they'll bring him back and see if Melisandre can see in the flames whether or not this is Tommen or actually the son of a hedge knight. Yeah. But I do wonder, now that we are thinking about that particular situation, if that all came to pass and Stannis had Tommen, had killed Joffrey and Cersei and Tyrion, all the Lannisters in King's Landing. Probably Lancel would die on the battlefield before that even came to pass.
Mm-hmm.
Would he kill sweet little Tommen, or would he just make him bend the knee?
Okay, I'll go with the litmus test, if you will, of that particular decision is Edric Storm. What is his plan for Edric Storm?
Right.
Because if he kills Edric Storm, because now his conscience, Sir Courtney Penrose, has taken the plunge from the walls,
right?
Then yes, Tommen's definitely dead. But if he actually is going to look after his nephew, Edric, and sort of help him and give him a lordship or whatever, then yeah, why not? I mean, Tommen's got a claim to the throne, but I think if Stannis wins the throne, with time, people will say, you know what, those Lannister children were not Baratheons.
Because history is written by the
victors.
Winners. Yeah, the victors. Right. Yeah.
And I mean, how many friends are the Lannisters going to have? Once they get... The reason that Lannisters have any friends is because they're in charge right now.
Yeah. Right.
So I don't imagine a groundswell. I mean, compare that to Daenerys. I mean, Daenerys, she could have a groundswell of people supporting her. Admittedly, her own father was an atrocious leader, but some of the Targaryens were good leaders. So she could have. There isn't a single example of a recent good Lannister leader. Joffrey is what they've got,
Right. Over one.
Right. Who's going to rally around Tommen, no matter how sweet he appears.
Yeah, that's true. Now, that Pycelle did say that he is the one that suggested to Aerys Targaryen to let the Lannisters in during the sack of King's Landing because he thought that Tywin was going to ascend to the throne, and he thought Tywin would be a good leader because he was such a good hand of the king. So I guess there's that. But the first Lannister king has not gone over very smoothly. That's for sure.
Yeah. But also, I mean, Tywin Tywin has done a lot of evil in the realm in the last few months.
Yes.
There's no one from the Riverlands who's going to support Tywin. There's no one from the North going to support Tywin.
Right. Absolutely. But, so Tyrion is surprised that he didn't know about this plan and about this plan, the Tommen plan. And he thinks to himself, either Varys didn't know about it, or he's playing a longer game and didn't tell Tyrion that this was coming. And I gotta say, I find it hard to imagine that Cersei could put together a plan that Varys wouldn't be aware of.
Yeah. But the one thing about this particular plan is, her plan of recruiting sellswords, she had to talk to people.
Right.
This particular plan, it's just her... Whichever... Did they name which one of the Kingsguard is supposed to go with him?
No. The only thing they said is... Bronn said, well, it won't be the Hound because he's Joffrey's dog.
That's right.
The Gold Cloaks can handle whoever else they send.
Yeah. And then presumably some hand-picked soldiers of her own. So and almost none of them need any prior notice, You tell them on the morning, Tommen's going to Rosby,
Yeah, I guess so. Just seems like Varys always knows everything. So it's weird.
I guess you would have to talk to Giles Rosby, and that is where the handover of information could get intercepted in some way.
True. But so Tyrion, they're talking in a sept, Lancel and Tyrion, and after Lancel delivers this news and leaves, Tyrion lights a candle at the warrior's altar for Jaime, which makes sense because he, as Tyrion says, he's one of yours, so protect him. But then he lights a candle for himself with the stranger, which is not a very busy altar. People tend to steer clear of that particular altar. And if you remember, we did a background on it. I think it might have been the episode, the cat praying, not the cat, our cat praying at the Sept episode where Renly was killed. And outcasts are the most frequent flyers at the stranger's altar. So I guess maybe he does consider himself to be an outcast, and so gravitates.
I think the other thing is he senses that war is coming to King's Landing, and maybe he's like, "Here's a candle instead of me."
Could be. We know Kat in that chapter. Kat thought she'd find no comfort with the stranger, so she said a prayer to all of the others except for that one. So I just found it interesting that he lit a candle for himself at the stranger's altar, which most people tend to avoid.
But yeah, I think you're right. The outcast thing is definitely how he perceives himself, I think.
Yeah.
So the message that Tyrion sends to Jacelyn Bywater is in code. Well, it's not really in code. It's just don't do what the message says. Bronn is the person carrying the actual message. Bronn is sent with the note. The note says, take 50 of your best swords and scout the Rose Road. Bronn says, why are we sending that message? No one's coming down the Rose Road. The Stannis is going to be coming up the King's Road. And he's like, yeah, but that's not what I want them to do. What I want you to tell Jacelyn Bywater is to go to Rosby and intercept Tommen and take him on and yada yada.
Yeah, it's basically just he's just covering his tracks, kind of.
Should that letter fall into someone else's hands?
Yes. If it said, hey, go take Tommen on the Rosby Road, that might be a little bit incriminating. So
yes. Whereas it seems unlikely you could torture anything out of Bronn, and frankly, why would you try?
Right. Yeah.
He's carrying a letter and he can't read.
Right. Now, the Rose Road runs southwest from King's Landing into the Reach. It's the road that Littlefinger would have traveled on to get to Bitterbridge. So,
yeah, and then it continues on from there to Highgarden.
Yes.
Right.
And meanwhile, the King's Road runs directly from King's Landing to Storm's End. So Bronn is right. If they're going to travel a road, they're not going to go a circuitous route over to the Rose Road, unless they went over there to pick up troops at Bitterbridge. But
Good point.
As we learned in this chapter, there's much chaos going on at Bitterbridge. So, but I think ultimately what he's trying to do here, Tyrion's trying to put his men in control of Tommen, whereas the Rosby guards would be loyal to Joffrey and Cersei. I mean, that seems pretty obvious, I guess.
Yeah. But then the question is, when all this goes down, because you assume this is going to go down, that he's going to send a large enough force to overwhelm Tommen's protectors, is Cersei going to find out? It feels like she must. Sir Giles Rosby going to send her a note that tells her that this has not quite gone the way she expects it. Is she going to be okay with it? Because the basics of the plan are still in place. Tommen's in Rosby, protected and hidden.
Right. So I don't know that she'd find out immediately, because if the Goldcloaks do take control, they probably won't let any ravens go out from Rosby to King's Landing. But this is a big thing to keep quiet for a long time, So at some point, it's probably going to come out what's happened, and then you just got to wonder, even more animosity toward Tyrion from Cersei, and we know she's known for retaliation when she's threatened. Just ask Ned Stark about that.
Yeah.
So
and actually, if you think about it, if you, I don't know if Sir Giles has been in King's Landing, but if you had a chance to talk to Sir Giles, what I would say if I was Cersei, I would say to Sir Giles,
Lord
Tommen's.
You keep calling him Sir Giles, but he's Lord Giles.
Lord Giles. What I would say to Lord Giles is, when Tommen is safely in Rosby, I want you to send me a raven that says, and then some kind of coded message.
Right.
And not only a coded message, but also a specific word that says everything went to plan. If that word is present, everything went to plan.
Right.
And if anything doesn't go to, if he gets there safely, send me the same coded message without that word,
Yes. That's probably something that Tyrion.
Because then what does Jacelyn Bywater do? Because Jacelyn Bywater, if Rosby says, I'm supposed to send a raven once he gets here, then you can read the note all you want and say, it has to be coded. This is the code that she'll understand he's safe,
Yes, right. That's a very good plan.
I've read literature before. I know what I'm doing. I could be quite the spy. So the letter doesn't offer it, but the verbal message from Bronn offers Sir Jacelyn Bywater, I'm mixing up my lords and sirs, a lordship for doing this.
Right.
And
he
Bronn
will be Lord Bywater.
Then he would be Lord, yes. Bronn offers to bounce Tommen on his own knee for a lordship. Which is a funny image right there.
Yes, it is.
To me, the whole thing seems a bit odd, though. I mean, Bywater's been loyal to Tyrion since he was appointed. I mean, and steadfast, he would do exactly what Tyrion asked him to do. Right.
Yeah. Well, what's my only thought as to why he might need to sweeten the pot is he put Jacelyn Bywater in place because he knew he was an honorable, trustworthy man, and maybe this feels dishonorable to be hijacking
because he's, but yeah, I guess so.
You're right, though. It is odd that someone who has been doing everything he's asked without need of dangling a carrot in front of him, he would dangle such a big carrot in front of him right here. But that was the only reason I could think of that he might need to...
because it is turning on people who are loyal to the crown.
Right. Yes.
Which he's not previously been asked to do. He's been asked to be loyal to Tyrion, but Tyrion's been acting in the best interest of the crown. Now he's clearly doing something against Cersei.
Right.
And recruiting Jacelyn Bywater to do it. Yeah.
Throwing Jaina Slint into the ship that's going to the Night's Watch does not exactly fly in the face of the King and Queen Regent. This directly flies in the face of the King and Queen Regent. So
right. Yeah, for sure.
But it's also not clear if...
Yeah, go on.
Yeah, it's not clear if Bywater is made the new Lord of Rosby, but the conversation sort of suggests it, because Bronn says, what should the new Lord do with the old one? Now, that's not necessarily saying he's the new Lord of Rosby versus the old Lord, Giles Rosby, but it certainly suggests that.
But Tyrion does say not to kill Lord Giles, right?
Yes, he does say that.
So, yeah.
So it was just a
I
little
hadn't
bit
thought of it.
confusing.
I assumed the lordship would be somewhere else. I didn't really think it, but I take your point. There was an implication, that, at least from Bronn, who just may not have understood.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So then the sort of next scene is Tyrion goes off to see Shae, and he throws caution to the wind because the curfew's been extended, which happened after the riot that killed the High Septon and several others.
Right. I thought it funny because he said that, his internal conversation says that the council extended the curfew, and I was like, the council? By my count, it's Cersei, Varys, and Tyrion that's only left on the council right now in town, right?
Pycelle?
Pycelle's not allowed to be on the council. That was part of the deal for getting him out of the Black Cells, is he couldn't be on the council anymore.
Oh, I lost the track of that one completely. How interesting.
I think it's just Cersei and Varys and Tyrion. So it's not quite
That's a good point.
Much of a council anymore. But because of the curfew, deaths are down, and that's good. Deaths are down at in the morning. There's less less corpses, I think is how Tyrion puts it. And then of course Varys says that the people curse Tyrion for this curfew, and he's in a tough spot without some sort of mass public relations campaign here.
Yeah, but it's hard. I mean, PR is a very modern thing.
Right. Yes.
You can certainly do a better job than Cersei does, and Tyrion could benefit from it because he's getting blamed for things that aren't his doing.
Right.
So that's definitely when you would actually want some PR. But yeah,
it'd certainly be hard to get the word out to 500,000 people living in King's Landing. You could have town criers out at every square, but
hear ye, I'm not the bad guy.
Right.
So when Tyrion gets to Shae's directly, the singer, Simon Silvertongue, annoys Tyrion, and he confesses that all singers annoy him. Was that because of, was he Marillion?
Marillion probably didn't help. Probably didn't help his opinion.
Yes. But this one doesn't even have the wit to pretend he doesn't recognise Tyrion, which of course would have been smart.
Right.
I have to say, I didn't really think of it when Simon Silvertongue reacts to Tyrion's entrance by saying, "Oh, it's Tyrion Lannister," kind of thing. I thought that was entirely natural, and Tyrion blamed him for not having the wit to pretend he didn't know who Tyrion was, because then at least Tyrion might have been inclined to let him go, because if he'd pretended not to know who Tyrion was, there was the chance he might not know who Tyrion was, right, and therefore he could have walked off into the night.
Yes.
But as it is, the last thing Tyrion wants is a guy who frequents taverns, going into said tavern and saying, "You know that big house over there?
Yeah, right.
With the pretty lady in it? You know who I saw there the other day?"
Yeah, it's definitely a concern.
Yeah.
Singers are known to tell tales. It's kind of what they do. So,
yeah.
But you could also easily see him going to Cersei for a price, depending on if he knows that there's any sort of animosity between the siblings.
The more likely is he just brags what he knows for a cup of wine to someone who does know that Cersei would pay for that piece of information.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, you're right. But the whole thing seemed rather avoidable. He knew when he was outside that the singer was in there, so why not just have the Ebony's guardsman who was there just make that guy leave, make him go out the side entrance or out through the back door or something, So
yeah, so the stupid one in this actual situation was Tyrion, right, not Simon.
Unless it is possible that the singer knew who Shae was ahead of time. It's possible she mentioned it, but you wouldn't think that she would.
You'd hope not. I mean, she's a little blasé about her safety, but you know who I am. I'm mistress to the hand of the king. Don't tell the queen.
So, yeah, I mean, what you've been saying all along about old Simon Silvertongue is right. What does he do with the singer now?
Yeah. But Shae does not want him killed. Shae recognises the danger to Simon Silvertongue and begs Tyrion not to kill him. And Tyrion, I think, basically acquiesces. It seems like he's not going to do anything to him.
At least directly. To her face. he says that.
Well, true, yeah.
He could, Simon Silvertongue could have an accident and fall into a pot of brown or something.
Which, I mean, in the current circumstances, would be very welcome by the pot owner.
Yeah, probably would. We got meat, people. We've got meat. Soylent Green.
So after Varys arrives and Tyrion learns the news about Penrose's death, Tyrion decides that it's no longer safe for Shae to stay in the manse. And actually, he mentions that during the riot that followed during the sort of general melee that followed the riot from the ride through town in the last Tyrion chapter, several, or at least one in particular, rich person's manse was burned down by rioters. So it's not safe just generally, not just the fact of who she is, but just generally it's not safe for her to be out here.
Right, especially at a nice house like this. And we discussed that exact thing when Tyrion sent Shaga to guard her during the riots because of its close proximity to Flea Bottom. So he says to her, he's going through they killed Aaron Santagar and they raped Lully Stokeworth and they killed the High Septon. And this is an even bigger boon if they discovered the Hand's lady was here. And she says, the Hand's whore, you mean? And then she makes a case for being his lady. And so she says, I could be your lady, though. I could dress in the beautiful things that you get me, and I could hold your hand at feasts, and I could give you sons. And it certainly looks like she's hoping to do a little social climbing here to move from the Hand's whore, as she puts it, to the Hand's lady.
To be honest, her career does not have a long lifespan.
Sure, yeah.
It would be good to gravitate towards something like a ladyship at this point. That would probably be a wise career move. Even she's only like 19 or 20 or something, but still.
Right. Yeah, I think maybe if Tyrion hadn't had the experience that he'd already had with Tysha, he might be enticed. He might be able to be enticed into agreeing to something like that.
I think, but for the absolute admonition of his father to not do this, he would do it.
Yeah.
I think he's completely in love with Shae and wants to make her happy. I think he just fears that if he does that, what befell Tysha will befall Shae.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that's his argument is I was strictly told not to bring you to court. And here you are, so I certainly can't be prancing around with you in the Red Keep. So
Right, and of course, if you just said that to someone, they might be like, well, what's the worst that could happen? Well, here's the story of my first wife.
Right, here's what could happen.
Right.
Yeah.
And this is not just a theoretical, this is the same cast of characters.
Right. That's a solid point, yeah.
This is not what would happen, this is not what could happen, this is what will happen.
Right. She's not taking the threat very seriously, though, and she keeps trying to arouse him, and it reminds him of Dancy. And Dancy was the red-headed prostitute at Chataya's brothel that kept flirting with him heavily before Aliyaya got to him because she was trying to win a bet that she could seduce him. Yeah, so that's the Dancy that he was referring to there.
Yeah. So then, troubling moment of the chapter, Tyrion slaps Shae across the face when she draws when she specifically says, "Are you afraid of your father spanking you?" And I did wondered about that. I wondered his reaction to that. Obviously, she was annoying him, but Tyrion seems a little bit more level-headed than, he's not the Hound,
Right.
I wondered if that partly is sort of because of his stature, the insecurities of being small. That image that she created of him over his father's knee getting spanked would be terribly humiliating for him, given his stature.
Sure, yeah, be like spanking like he's a child. Well, she says, so you're
right.
Does he think you're a child or something? Right,
but if Jaime were given the same image, he would just go, that's ridiculous, But
right.
Tyrion could imagine it and feels the shame of it.
Yeah,
so his confidence and cockiness feels like, he's still got these insecurities about how people find him laughable.
Oh, certainly. He mentions at the end of this chapter that he's the whatever they call him, the evil devil monkey or something like that.
Right.
And so he's certainly aware that those kind of things are still being said about him. But I agree that that's a very solid possibility. But also, I feel like this conversation is starting to show that this relationship that Shae and Tyrion have going on is becoming really tricky to keep up, because his mind is really split between rational Tyrion mind and the fantasy that he's trying to uphold here. He even thinks in his head at one point that my love for you shames me enough. And then after he tells the Tysha story, he thinks, how could I tell her and think that she will, how could I tell her that about Tysha and think that she still love me? And then his very next thought is, you stupid dwarf, only gold and jewels. It's only the gold and jewels that the whore loves. So I was thinking maybe the mocking nature of that statement kind of disrupts the whole story that he's trying to feed himself, that she loves and worships him, and that she is secretly laughing at him too, and that causes him to snap momentarily.
Yeah. I do wonder though. I do wonder about his. I mean, he blurts out the Tysha story to her in sort of like as a sort of penance for the slap,
right?
But I mean, he doesn't come out of the Tysha story that badly.
No.
I mean, he looks like an abused child, basically,
right.
is what he comes out of that.
Yes, I agree. I didn't think when he was so ashamed of having told her. I thought, aside from the fact that he did have sex with her at the end, that
right, but he was made to. He was not,
Yes, absolutely. He was a child. He was like in his early teens or mid-teens or something. So, yes, I think he doesn't come off nearly as bad as he probably thinks that he is.
Right. But yeah, I mean, you make a good point, because I mean, we don't have Shae's POV. We have Tyrion's, and he's madly in love with Shae.
Right.
Shae may just be an entirely mercenary prostitute who just wants the money.
It's very possible that that's the case.
She's very good at acting the way she needs to act. If she is not that,
yes,
but then maybe that's the point. Maybe she's very good at it.
It's possible she could truly have feelings for him, but it's also very possible that she is riding this golden ticket for as long as she can.
Yeah, it is. She is hard to read in this part because, of course, she goes into sort of like a silent lockdown after getting the slap. It is possible she definitely thinks less of Tyrion now for both the story of Tysha and the slap, but it's hard to read.
I agree. I think the description was intentionally written to be hard to read because Tyrion doesn't give us any insight. He can't really read it either, and I was thinking maybe that wide-eyed look that she has that he can't read is her realizing that what happened to Tysha could be her fate, which makes her goal of being a lady of Lannister pretty near impossible.
Right. And maybe she should aim somewhere else.
Right. Because at this point, possibly she's making steps in her mind toward a life of courtly parties and lordly children, and
Jacelyn Bywater is about to be made a lord, so that's
right. Yes, there's lordships in the air.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. But I would like to point out to her the one thing that doesn't seem to cross her mind, but again, she's hard to read, is the reason he chose that moment to blurt that out was because he's warning her. This is what my father will do. This is what my father will do. I'm not trying to hide you because I'm ashamed of you. It's because I fear for your life if I reveal you,
Yes, absolutely. If she thought about it that way, it certainly makes an awful lot of sense. But that she says that she doesn't fear Cersei, and he says, "Well, I do." And then Shae says, "Well, you should kill her and be done with it. You two don't have any love between the two of you anyway." And Tyrion points out something that is pretty obvious, but maybe if you're not thinking about it, you don't realize that all of his power comes from the fact that he is a Lannister. And he mentions that although he doesn't necessarily care all that much for Cersei, his brother and his father hold her dear. And if he crosses them and kills Cersei, he's a nobody, He loses everything he has that gives him his power and authority.
Yeah.
So
at this point, Tyrion mentions that his elbow hurts. I don't even remember that. Was that at the Battle of the
on the Green Fork?
Green Fork.
Yes, it was. I think it was the last fight with the knight that he ends up killing because he puts his spiked helmet into the gut of the horse and it falls on the knight. And I believe he hurts his elbow in that particular battle. Yeah. But yes, that's what he's referring to.
So it's a solid plan to bring Shae into the Red Keep. I mean, obviously she'd be safer there, but a kitchen servant is pretty rough. Varys paints a very ugly picture of what her life would be like as a kitchen servant, being preyed upon by the male servants, and she'd be beaten down by the job.
Right.
It really is beneath her.
Yes, that's one thing I was wondering, because she is vehemently opposed to the idea, and I wondered if it was afraid of life in the kitchens, like you were just saying, that she's going to be molested and people are going to try and sneak into her bed at night, or is she also mentions her fear of the physical toll it'll take on her, where her hands will get cracked and red, and just the general wear and tear of the work, and she's thinking, well, Tyrion could discard me at any day, and then I've got to go back to my day job, and it sure would help if I'm as young and pretty as I am right now, if I have to go back to that life.
Yeah.
But she says that her father made her his kitchen wench, and that's why she ran off. And Tyrion says, wait, you told me he made you his whore, and that's why you ran off. And she's like, oh, well, yeah, it was both. I didn't like either of those things. And I thought, both could certainly be true. Or possibly has she made up a backstory for the character she's playing as Tyrion's girlfriend that she thought would elicit a response that she wanted from him.
Yeah, but I mean, let's be honest. I mean, your typical prostitute in Westeros is not going to have a very fun and nice backstory.
Oh, yes, absolutely, yes.
Her made-up backstory is probably fairly close to the truth, as close to the truth as she wants it to be.
Right. Yes, that's very, very true.
But Varys' idea of instead making her Lollys's maidservant is great. It's safe, it's not taxing, easier access to one another.
Right.
Out of sight, out of mind from Cersei, because she's got no interest in the
Stokeworths, yeah.
Stokeworths, sorry.
Yeah, and then Varys says something like, do you trust me? And he says, I trust you like one of my own blood, in truth. And I was like, wow, that's damning him with faint praise right there.
That is, yeah. And that wouldn't be lost on Varys, I feel. Right. Oh my God. When have I lied to you? So they discussed Penrose's death. There were guards in the room? I thought the guards were outside the room.
I think they were outside the room. Yes.
Right. There were guards outside the room. There was nobody in there before or after. So that means suicide or something magical, it seems.
Right.
And Varys points out that he didn't sound very suicidal that morning when he was tongue-lashing Stannis and his retinue.
Yeah. Of course, we know what happened. But if we didn't know what happened, we might have thought that Davos's argument could possibly be right, where he said maybe Courtney Penrose was offering this trial by combat as a way to get out of this situation, even though he knew it was going to cost him his life. So
yeah, that he didn't want to bring the suffering down on the people of Storm's End.
Right. And at the same time, he didn't want to go back on his word, so he thought, well, I'll do a trial by combat, I'll lose, and then it'll be done with. But we, of course, know that there was a shadow. It would be quite the coincidence if they unleashed a shadow monster into the tower at the same time that Courtney Penrose was jumping to his death. That would be... It'd
be funny if the guards broke in and the shadow monster was like, not me! Not me! Already gone!
I came in, it was like this. But Tyrion suggests that possibly it was the Faceless Men as an alternative to the magic that Varys is proposing might have been the cause of Courtney Penrose's death.
Do our listeners know who the Faceless Men are?
They do a bit, because the Faceless Men were also proposed as a possibility to kill Dany when King Robert wanted her dead at that council meeting. And I think it was Littlefinger said the Faceless Men are way too expensive for the task at hand. And but they're a group of assassins in Essos. So it certainly it's a more logical option. Like, if you were trying to look at it from what are our logical possibilities, it's certainly a more logical option than there was a shadow assassin that killed him.
So, but this all makes Varys smell magic. You know, he smells magic. Tyrion remains more skeptical. So Varys confesses then why he is a believer in magic. His story is awful. It elicits sympathy even from Tyrion, and the full story goes that he was part of a mummers troupe that toured the cities that ring the Narrow Sea, and one day his master sold him to a sorcerer. He was drugged to be helpless but not insensate. He was then castrated and his genitals thrown into a fire, and at that point a voice spoke from the flames. The sorcerer left him to die, but he became an adept thief, graduating from stealing purses to secrets. So you can see why he would hate magic, but you could also see why he would believe in it.
Right.
Now, before Tyrion can counter any of his story, he says, and believe me, I recognize the fact that under the duress that I was under, I might have imagined something. He said, right. But I keep thinking about it, and there was something there, more than just my fear and my agony.
Good way to put it.
I heard something. Yeah.
Yes, right.
So you can understand why, if Stannis is doing Varys is not going to be a friend of Stannis.
Yeah, and we've talked about this, I think, the past few times that we've talked about Stannis, is that, you know, taking King's Landing is his first challenge, but his next biggest challenge might be dealing with the faith and those who follow the faith of the Seven, that he's trying to bring this new religion in. And, I mean, you can ask Aenys Targaryen how well it goes to fight against the faith of the Seven, especially if you don't have a dragon to quiet the opposition.
But of course, only Varys thinks there's a magical explanation for this. I mean, like everything else, Brienne of Tarth has been labeled as the murderer of Renly.
Right. Cat thinks something happened, but
true. Courtney Penrose threw himself off to end the siege, whatever.
Right.
So, as long as he doesn't keep doing it, going back to this as long as he wins King's Landing by, with his flaming sword, then he doesn't really have a problem. Apart from the fact he is going to want to change the sort of de facto religion of the land.
That's where I'm getting at, yes.
The death of the High Septon might work in his favour.
Oh, good point. Yes, that's a good point.
So do you totally buy Varys' story? I mean, it's not completely implausible. I mean, he obviously is a eunuch and was at some point not a eunuch, so there must have been something that led to that. It felt heartfelt as he was describing it, but Varys is the master of whispers,
Yeah, and also an accomplished actor. So,
Oh, good point.
Making up and selling a story would not be outside of his wheelhouse. And has anyone checked to confirm that he is a eunuch? Could this be a story that he's been making up? He just is currently he's currently portraying a begging brother very convincingly. Could he also on the daily be pretending to be a eunuch? I honestly don't know. Off the top of my head, I can't think if there's been any proof that's ever been mentioned.
Yeah,
I'd have to look into that.
Yeah, interesting.
But
I think he has a high voice, right?
I don't know. That's a good question.
No, he doesn't.
I don't.
I believe we've heard before that Varys has a high voice. Now that could be if you're castrated pre-pubescence, your voice wouldn't break.
Yeah, he was a boy. I don't know what level of puberty he had reached by that point, but but we also see, like you mentioned, he's the master of whispers. We see the start of this career right here because he becomes a thief after this whole incident, and he mentions that he discovered that the contents of letters are more valuable than the contents of one's purse. And so began his career in trading and acquiring secrets. And
so, assuming his story is true, I wonder now, we've had a few examples of magic in the book. They always seem to have sort of a price to be paid in pain or blood or body parts or lives, in fact.
Right. Yes. Yeah.
With the possible exception of Stannis, who only seems to be losing sleep.
Right. We haven't seen what, aside from the stress and sleep that he's losing, we haven't seen him sacrifice any person or
but maybe
genitalia.
He is. Right. Maybe he is sacrificing something that we're unaware of,
Right.
Or perhaps, given that she's pregnant, perhaps it's seed sort of thing that he has to donate.
Sure. Yeah.
So one thing they mentioned at this point was that there's no word from Littlefinger.
Where did he
remember,
go?
He went off to Bitterbridge to talk to
Sir Loras.
The Tyrells, right?
Right.
And it's not been heard of since.
Yeah, and to make matters worse, Varys tells Tyrion that there's been no word from his father, and that the fear is that Tywin's army is going to get trapped between his foes, which we know that is exactly the North's and the Riverlands' plan, is to trap him between his foes. You have to imagine if Varys can pick up on it, that Tywin is aware that that's a possibility as well and make some sort of plan. But then Varys goes on to say that the Oakheart leaf and the rowan tree have been seen north of the Mander. And those are both reach houses. So what are they doing north of the Mander? It doesn't specifically say they're in the Riverlands, but the Riverlands are north of the Mander. So could they possibly be meeting with Tywin himself or parlaying with Robb? Or possibly has Littlefinger been successful and they're riding to help Tywin?
Interesting.
Yeah, because he doesn't go on. All he says is the Oakheart leaf, which is House Oakheart, and the Rowan tree, House Rowan, have been seen north of the Mander. So we'll have to keep an eye on that. Yep.
And the other news he provides is that the Tarleys, Sam Tarley's father, Randall Tarley, is putting a great many to the sword, mostly Florence. Basically, he sees what the Florence as turncoats for switching from Renly to Stannis. But again, Renly is dead. But Randall Tarley, we know he's inflexible. Yeah. He and Stannis would be great buddies.
They'd either be great buddies or terrible enemies. Yeah. He also mentions that Lord Caswell has shut himself up in his castle, and Lord Caswell is Laurent Caswell, the Lord of Bitterbridge. So he's just like, I'm done with this. I'll wash my hands of it. I'm staying in my tower till you sort all this out.
But Stannis is coming. Tyrion's reaction suggests he might not have got the 2 weeks that he was hoping for last time. He does consider whether the Martells could be spurred into attacking Stannis from the south, but they conclude that that's not actually possible. So whatever this chain is it going to be sufficient to keep Tywin's army at bay?
No, not Tywin's army at bay.
Oh. So whatever this chain is it going to be sufficient to protect King's Landing without the help of Tywin's army?
Yes, exactly. That's the thing. Like, he sounds quite panicked. And I guess you would be, regardless of how prepared you felt if a huge army was heading toward your city and you have no army of your own to defend it. But yes, he has been working on this chain. He needed 2 more weeks of at last check. But maybe that chain is just something to help them win, not this is going to do it for us.
Right.
So
do you have some background?
I do have a bit of background. So Tommen is being taken to Rosby, just northeast up the Rosby Road from King's Landing, as we mentioned already. And Rosby is a small castle surrounded by a village, as well as orchards and fields of barley. And we learned back in Tyrion 4 that most of the food coming into King's Landing since the outbreak of the war in the Riverlands is coming from Rosby. Lord Giles is the head of House Rosby. We've mentioned him multiple times in this chapter. He's been a fixture at court since our story started. He's the one that's always coughing into a square silk at events. That's basically the description every time, is in Rosby. Okay. Lord Rosby was coughing. The house sigil is... It has 3 red chevrons on a white background, and I'm not quite sure how to describe what is... It looks like...
Just before you carry on with the sigil, right now it sounds a lot like what he might find in his handkerchief after he's done the coughing.
A very good point.
But there's more to this sigil. Do go on.
The sigil is dotted with these, what I guess I would describe as like little stick figure girls. They kind of look like scarecrows wearing a dress. It's got like little arms and a little head, and then like a kind of a triangle at the bottom, like a little dress that dot all over the sigil. I'm really not sure. Maybe there's a name for it. I don't know, but if it is, I don't know what it is. Anyway, the Rosbys have been quite loyal to the crown since the first days of Aegon's conquering. Not surprisingly, the lord at the time might be Lord Giles. He's old enough. But the Lord of Rosby at the time peacefully surrendered to Aegon's sister Rhaenys and her dragon Meraxes. Big shock there. But and since Maegor the Cruel, a.k.a. Maegor the Misunderstood, gets a reference in this chapter, I'll share a quick connection between House Rosby and the Targaryen king. Sir Rayford Rosby defended King Maegor during his trial of the Seven to decide the rightfulness of Maegor's claim to the throne. Unfortunately, Rayford died during the fight. However, the Lord of Rosby remained loyal to the king throughout his reign. He was actually one of the last to see the king alive. And after Maegor's death, Lord Rosby drank a cup of hemlock to join his king in death. And then the Lord's young son received forgiveness from Maegor's successor, King Jaehaerys I Targaryen, on Dragonstone.
So I'm not alone in thinking he was misunderstood.
Right.
Good to know.
At least Lord Rosby was pro Maegor.
So comparison with the television show, this one is a bit all over the place. Shae has been working as Sansa's maidservant for a while in the TV show. So
right.
The two are coming back together a little bit. She never stayed in a manse. She was always in the Red Keep.
Is Lollies even a character in the TV show?
Is who?
Lollies.
Lollies? No, I don't think so.
Okay.
No, I don't think so.
Because it was Sansa that was almost about to be...
Almost raped.
Yeah. Right, and the Hound saved her. Right. Okay, I got it.
Cersei is livid about losing Myrcella, so she certainly doesn't intend to ship Tommen away too.
Okay.
But like you said, maybe ship him away a little bit to avoid being shipped away further by Tyrion. That does actually make a little bit of sense. But
sure.
Certainly no discussion of that in the TV show. A little bit later in the story than where we currently are in the book, Tyrion and Varys have the conversation that they've had in this chapter, but Varys then balks at actually telling Tyrion about his castration, but says, I'll tell you one day, but let me tell you, for a man in service to such powers, magic,
right,
to sit on the Iron Throne, I can think of nothing worse. So he is alluding to the story that we just heard.
Right.
But that comes later in the story, and then later still, he does eventually tell Tyrion the story, but that's way down the line.
Okay.
In the TV show.
All right.
Season 3. We're still in season 2.
Okay, right. That makes sense because we're in book 2.
Yeah. Pedantry Corner, it's really odd to offer Bywater this lordship, but you have made me think it's not that odd. There is a reason here. He is being asked to compromise his ideals just a little bit.
Yeah, it is
to take a political side.
Right. Yeah, I guess so. But it is quite the carrot to be offering.
Yeah.
Because where do you go from there next? Make you heir to the throne.
When you wanted to do something big, yeah. But one thing I will say, that if I was Jacelyn Bywater, I mean, even if I do feel like a kinship and loyalty to Tyrion, any lordship from the Lannisters feels like fool's gold.
Oh, yeah.
Whichever one of them gave it to you, the other one is going to steal it back from you.
How many times has that happened already?
Right, yeah.
And how precariously they're sitting on the throne right now might not matter anyway.
Yeah. News and notes.
News and notes. Well, we don't have like a lot of news. But we're thinking of doing something. We've been asked a few times about this.
Talk about it.
All right.
If we talk about it on the pod, then we have to do it.
Well, I guess so. So a lot of you have asked us about whether we have like a buy me a coffee site or something like that set up, and we never have. But I think we're going to do it. I think we're going to set up.
Yeah, let's do it.
It's basically for tips. If you guys, if you like the antics we put on and you're interested in tipping us, we will take it. We do put a non-trivial amount of effort into the show. So it certainly does help.
Despite appearances.
Yes. And in other news, our merchandise site is still cooking with gas. Is that a saying?
Wow.
That's that
We're like a
relates outside
conglomerate.
of the U.S. here? Cooking with gas?
Cooking with gas? Yeah, I think so. I think I probably learned it here, but I think the implication's understood.
All right, cool. Well, yeah, I mean, go check out our merchandise website. It's in the show notes of this episode, and see what we got going on there.
And we got a review from Robbie4,
Yes.
Podcast Addict. Fantastic podcast for book readers. The guys go into so much detail and point out things you might have missed in your rereads. So glad they've started doing Clash of Kings. Well, thank you, Robbie4.
Thank you very much.
All right,
and
let's draw the
just to point out, that is
conclusions of this.
another way that
Sorry.
Android listeners can leave us reviews. Podcast Addict does have a review option, so you don't have to just use podchaser.com. You could also, if you're using the Podcast Addict app to listen to us, you can leave us a review right there as well.
Lovely.
But-
So let's conclude. Stannis' plan has worked, and he is free to attack King's Landing, but he certainly made an enemy of Varys.
Yeah, and I do wonder if others in the realm will feel similarly if he tries to force this religion on them.
The only thing, yes, that the religion aspect, true, but the one thing is the magic aspect. I think only Varys is aware, and it will be hard for that to become, unless he comes to King's Landing and does the same trick again. You know?
Why not? It's 2 for 2
Eventually,
as far as
everyone's
we
going to know. Oh, there he is again, old Shadow Stannis.
Sending Shadow Stannis down to the coffee shop. Pick me up a latte.
And don't kill the barista this time. Poor Melisande, she's exhausted. Can I go? I'll get you the coffee. So Shae definitely needs to keep a lower profile. His Simon Silvertongue is going to be a loose thread.
Yeah, because, I mean, Shae is Tyrion's weakness, and I'm sure it's a weakness Cersei would love to exploit if she found out about it. So, yeah, he needs to keep that under wraps as best he can.
Yeah, and Tyrion needs to not hit her, not now, not ever.
Yeah, but like I was saying earlier, this, and I'll put in quotes, relationship is possibly starting to show some threads here. We get to hear his internal battle over the reality of the situation versus his wishful fantasy of her really loving him and really being his lady.
Yeah, but then again, she probably wants that too. And she's probably, her act is probably an act which she can live for the rest of her life if she gets what she wants.
That's true. That's true. Yeah. Although that seems like it's going to be unlikely unless Tywin has a major change of heart if he ever shows up to King's Landing. Right. Or if Tywin dies.
That's right.
Tywin
He's not a young man.
Dies,
And he is between the forces of Robb Stark and the Riverlands, if intel is to be believed. And possibly the Reach is crushing him from the other side as well. He's surrounded on all sides. We can but hope. So Tommen to be kept safe outside of King's Landing seems like a good plan. You definitely need to move him if Stannis wins. Rosby is convenient, so Cersei could go visit him, I guess, is part of her thinking. But
right.
What happens when Cersei finds out that her plan has been corrupted? She may not.
She may not.
Really may not. But
if she does, that's going to create some additional animosity here. Not like there's not enough already between the two siblings.
And where, in the name of the old gods and the new, is Littlefinger? I mean, what you were saying about the Rowans and the Oakhearts being seen north of the Mander does suggest that Littlefinger is out there making things happen. But for whom?
Right. That could be good news that they're north of the Mander. That could be bad news, or it could just be it could be nothing useful at all. We don't know yet. But you'd think that he would have sent a raven back with some sort of status update, at least saying, "Hey, I arrived at Bitterbridge on time. Weather's great. Had a really nice meal.
Wish you were here."
Yes.
Think I'll stick around for a few months.
I'm in no hurry.
And finally, the battle-shirking Baratheon is on his way to King's Landing.
It's kind of ironic that a man who has earned his reputation by being a seasoned battle commander has been so uninterested in actually engaging in battle here. Mm-hmm. But Tyrion does seem pretty worried.
He does seem worried, yeah, for sure, yeah. Is the chain not ready? Is it not enough? We don't know. We don't know what the chain is for.
Right.
And help seems far away. Tywin's army doesn't seem close by, and nobody else is going to help.
Right.
Well, maybe not. Maybe help is coming down the Rose Road.
Right.
Thanks to Littlefinger.
You'd think if it was, he would send a raven ahead to say, hey, help's on the way, yet again, but...
Yeah, but it is Littlefinger.
Right.
All right. As always, you can reach us at ghost.harrenhall@gmail.com and follow us on Twitter at GhostHarrenhall. We're on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Discord.
That's right. And if you wouldn't mind going out and leaving us a 5-star rate and or a glowing review, we certainly would appreciate that. And if you do, we will try to read it in a future episode.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.